Hey everyone! So in this video I'd like to say a few more things about combining like terms. So we saw that like terms are just terms with identical variable factors. Right, so for example, the terms 7x and 5x, these are examples of like terms because the variable factors are just x, right? The only variable being multiplied in each of these terms is a single copy of that variable x. And so here, because they have identical variable factors, these are examples of like terms. Here maybe to do a few more, let's look at 3abc and negative 4bac. Okay, so these are like terms because their variable factors are just one copy of that variable a as a factor, one copy of that variable b as a factor, and one copy of that variable c as a factor. These are like terms. And then one non-example is 5u and 6uv. So we do see that copy of that variable u as a factor in both of these terms, but in that second term, there's a factor of v that we don't see in the first. So these are examples of non-like terms. And so we can simplify expressions, we saw in the last video, by combining like terms. And so maybe just to remind you that this word simplify here, this just means that we can take an expression and write it as a simpler but equivalent expression. It's really capturing all the same ideas. Always comes out to the same value. So we can simplify expressions by combining like terms. And so what does it mean to combine like terms? Well, combining like terms just means that if we have two like terms, we can combine them by adding or subtracting their coefficients and keeping the variables the same. Okay, so for example, if I have the expression 2 plus 3abc minus 4bac, so one thing I want you to notice is that there's this 2 plus 3 here, but that's the multiplication in order of operations tells us that 3 is being multiplied to 3abc, or to ABC before anything else. And so, trying to add 2 and 3 together wouldn't really make sense. It wouldn't give us an equivalent expression. We wouldn't be able to do that. We can only simplify expressions, at least so far we've only learned how to simplify expressions by combining like terms. And so here we have two like terms, and we just add or subtract their coefficients. In this case, we're still gonna have that term 2. There's no like terms with 2, but these two like terms, 3abc and minus 4bac, well, we would just combine their coefficients, 3 and negative 4, to get minus 1 abc. Right? If I have 3 sets of abc and I'm taking away 4 sets of abc, well then the 3 and 3 would cancel out, but then there would still be 1 left over as a negative. So I have 2 minus ABC. Okay, so we saw a handful of examples of combining like terms in the last video. I just wanted to give another one as a reminder. But here in this video, I like to look at examples of combining like terms when parentheses are involved. And I also like to apply our ideas of combining like terms to solving more equations and inequalities. So when we've got an expression where there's a group in parentheses that's being added, we can typically omit or drop those parentheses. Right, so for example, if I have 10 plus 5 minus 2, what does this look like when we compute it the normal way? This would be 10 plus, we would do the parentheses first, right? Compute what's inside the parentheses to give us 3. Right, so this would be 10 plus 3 is 13. And so what I'm saying here is that when we're adding a group like this in parentheses, we can typically just drop the parentheses and keep all of the signs of every term the same, right? So this is really the same as, so if I have 10 plus 5 minus 2 in parentheses, this is really just the same as taking 10 and adding on 5, then subtracting 2. There's really no difference, right? So if I have 10 plus 5, that's 15, and I still have the minus 2, and this is still 13. Right, dropping those parentheses from here to here didn't really do anything to our expression. And so this is the same even when we start dealing with expressions that include variables. Right, so if I look at the expression, let's say 2x plus 3, and then I'm adding on this group in parentheses, it's 5x minus 7. What I'm saying here is that these parentheses that we're adding on in this expression, we can drop them, right? So this is the same as 2x plus 3 plus 5x, and then I still have that minus 7, right? The signs of the terms inside that group are going to remain the same. And so here we can continue to simplify this expression by combining the like terms. And so I see this 2x and this 5x, these are like terms and they add up together to give me 7x. Right, I add their coefficients and I keep the variables exactly the same. And then we have this plus 3 and this minus 7, and that combines to negative 4. Right, if I have $3 and I owe 7, I would pay some of that off, but I would still owe $4 left over. And so this idea about omitting the parentheses when we're adding on a group in parentheses is also true when we have parentheses in the front of an expression. Right? So if I have something like, let's say, in parentheses 7 minus 2 plus 5 plus 1. So although there's no plus sign here written prior to those parentheses, it's kind of like there's an implied plus sign, right? And so this really is the same as just dropping those parentheses and writing 7 minus 2 plus 5 plus 1. Right, the first thing we would do in this expression on the left is we would compute 7 minus 2, and that's really the same thing we would do here on this expression on the right when the parentheses are omitted. And so if I give you an expression and I ask you to simplify this expression, let's say the expression is negative 2a plus 3 in parentheses, and I'm adding this on with in parentheses 3a minus 6. Actually, these parentheses aren't really telling us anything important, and we can completely just drop them. So this is minus 2a plus 3 plus 3a minus 6. And then we can combine like terms. Now that these terms aren't inside these parentheses, it's a lot more clear how we can simplify this expression. This minus 2a and this plus 3a combine to a single a. And then plus 3 and minus 6, that combines to minus 3. So when we subtract a group in parentheses, here we actually have to be a little bit more careful, and we have to reverse the sign of each term if we want to remove these parentheses. And so let me illustrate an example where we're using concrete numbers to see why this is true. And so if I have 20 minus, and then in parentheses 5 plus 3, right, so how do we do this normally? This would be 20 minus, well, 5 plus 3 would give us 8, and we'd compute that first inside of parentheses. And so 20 minus 8, this comes out to be 12. And so what I'm trying to say here is that if I have 20 minus this group in parentheses, 5 plus 3, well here, this 8 really came from subtracting this 5 and subtracting this 3 afterwards, right? So subtracting 8 is the same as subtracting 5 and then subtracting 3 afterwards. And so really what we did by subtracting this group was we really subtracted each term in that group. This is the same as minus 5 and minus 3. And we can see that this gives us the same thing, right? 20 minus 5, that's 15, and we still have this minus 3 left over. And 15 minus 3 gives us 12, and so we get that same result that we saw earlier. And so if we want to drop parentheses in an expression, and that group in parentheses is, we're subtracting it, well, really, to drop those parentheses, we need to reverse the sign of every term in that parentheses. Right, so here, 20 minus 5 plus 3 is the same as 20 minus 5, as well as minus 3. And so let's take a look at an example where we're dealing with expressions, right? So if we have minus 4x minus, in parentheses, 2y plus 5x, and I wanted to simplify this, well, we can get rid of these parentheses by, we know that we're subtracting this group, so this would be the same as we still have the minus 4x, and if I'm going to subtract these parentheses, I'm going to subtract each term in that group. So this is the same as minus 2y, as well as minus 5x. Right? So this is identical to what we did above, right? So here we have this minus 5 plus 3, and that was the same as subtracting that 5 and subtracting that 3. We change the signs in each of the terms in that group. And so now we're really set up to combine the like terms, right? So there's like terms here, minus 4x and minus 5x. And this comes out to be minus 9x. And that minus 2y, that's not like terms with anything in this expression, so that's just left as is. And so here, just to convince you that minus 4x and minus 5x combined to minus 9x, right? Remember that minus 4 minus 5, or negative 4 minus 5, this is the same as negative 4 plus negative 5. And this is like saying if I owe $4 and I owe $5, well, I really owe $9. So another example, I think this is kind of the trickier example, is just in general subtracting with parentheses. If we have minus 5b and then minus, in parentheses, 3 minus 2b, and then in parentheses we're adding on 4b minus 6, how would we simplify this expression? I definitely encourage you to try this example yourself first before we go over it together. But here, what we've really established is that we can drop the parentheses for addition without worrying at all about the terms inside the parentheses. And then we can drop the parentheses when we're subtracting that group, but we just have to reverse the sign of every term in that group. So this is the same as negative 5b. And then we have minus 3, right? We're subtracting away that first term. And then if we subtract away the second term, we're subtracting away negative 2b. This is a lot like adding 2b. Right? When we subtract a negative, subtraction is just adding the opposite. And so if we're going to add the opposite of negative 2b, well, that'll be the same as plus 2b. And then on the right, well, we just leave the signs the same, right? So this is plus 4b, and this is also minus 6, right? The sign remain the same. And then we can just combine like terms. This is negative 5b plus 2b and plus 4b. Well, negative 5b plus 2b, maybe let's do these one at a time. So that's negative 5b plus 2b is negative 3b. And then we still have that minus 3 plus 4b minus 6. So all I've done so far is combine these two like terms. Just to do this one step at a time. And then we still have to combine the remaining b term. This is negative 3b plus 4b is a single copy of that b term. And then we have minus 3 and minus 6. And this combines to minus 9. So b minus 9 is the most simplified form of our original expression. And so what does this result mean? It just means that this expression we have here, whatever value we plug in for b, and this is b minus 9, it'll give us the same value as plugging in that b into this expression here. And so, these two expressions, they give the same result every time. We might as well work with this one if we have to, as opposed to this kind of messy expression here. So that's all we've done when we've simplified this expression. Here's another example of an expression that we can simplify that includes parentheses. Have a go at it yourself first, and then we can go over it together. So here, we can work through dropping the parentheses and paying attention to the signs of the terms in the parentheses. But one thing we can also pay attention to first is when we have something in parentheses, you're sort of asked to compute that thing first when we're sort of considering order of operations. And so the first thing we really ought to do is we ought to look at each of these groups and ask, is there anything we can do within that group itself? And actually, there's not, right? So here, if I look at 6uv plus 8u, those aren't like terms, I can't combine them. Minus 5 minus 3uv, those aren't like terms, I can't combine them either. And then lastly, 2u minus 2v, those aren't like terms, I can't do anything with that as is. And so the next step here would be to see if we can do anything if we drop the parentheses and sort of worry or be careful about the signs. And so here, if I drop the parentheses in this first term, right, because we're not subtracting them, this is 6uv plus 8u. And then the next group in parentheses, again, it's being added, so I can just drop the parentheses and keep the signs. And so this is plus negative 5. So I can just write this as minus 5. Right, adding on negative 5 is the same thing as subtracting 5. And then here, this is minus 3uv. And then here, now we're subtracting this group, so we ought to change the sign of each term. This is minus 2u. And we're also changing the sign of the second term. This is plus 2uv. Okay, so now we can combine like terms. 6uv, combine that with minus 3uv, comes out to be 3uv. And then adding that with 2uv comes out to be 5uv. Right? So this is 6 minus 3 is 3, and then plus 2 gives us 5. Right? So this is 5 sets of that uv term. And then we have 8u and minus 2u. So this is 6 sets of that u term. And then lastly, we have this minus 5 that doesn't have any like terms. That's okay. And so it's just left as is. So 5u plus 6, or 5uv plus 6u minus 5. That's the final result, the most simplified form of this expression we were given.